My name is Aarron Walter, and my appendix is fully intact. I think many of you, given your discipline, you've probably heard that Marshall McLuhan quote, "We build our tools, and thereafter our tools shape us," which is a true statement. And I think a lot of times when people hear that statement, they think of our tools shaping us through the way they empower us, the functionality of what they create. But it turns out our tools shape us in a lot of other ways that we're not always conscious of. One thing that I discovered in those early days at MailChimp, experimenting with different product design methodologies, was that products are certainly functional. People buy a thing to be able to do a thing. They have a job that they want to do with that. But they can also engage us emotionally. And when they do that really well, they transcend just sort of the normal product status into something much deeper, something much more valuable. So if we think about psychology and design, there's this intersection, and there's always been an intersection as long as humans have been making things, whether that's painting the caves of Lascaux, or carving the Venus of Willendorf, or creating the Cologne Cathedral. These are objects that we've physically made, that we've, industrial design, architecture, craft, all these things, we've always been making things to change the way people feel. And when we change the way people feel, we shape their behavior. And in the modern times, we can think about that as shaping behavior down a particular path. It's a healthy path. Maybe it's a learning path for a customer. Maybe it's helping them make a buying decision and thinking about it from a company's perspective. Here's a couple examples real quick. And show of hands, how many people have an Apple Watch? Yeah, so it's a lot of us, right? A lot of people wear an Apple Watch. These are two watches here. They are not functionally equivalent objects. The Apple Watch is far superior in many ways to a conventional watch. This is an Apple Watch and a Rolex GMT Master. The Apple Watch will tell you your heart rate. It'll tell you how long you've slept, how long you've stood. It'll keep you healthier. It'll notify you if you're starting to be off balance, which could cause a fall. It will tell you if you're having a tachycardia. It'll see if your temperature is elevated. And if you're in a car crash, it'll tell people and potentially save your life. That's a very functional object and a tremendously valuable object. That costs about $400 to $600. You can spend more if you want to, depending on how you kit it out. The watch on the right, the Rolex GMT Master, it went to space multiple times. It was developed in partnership with Pan Am Airlines. Most of you probably never flew on Pan Am. Has anyone ever flown on a Pan Am flight? No, you probably don't even know. You have? I'm impressed. Most of us don't even know what Pan Am is. It tells time, your current time. It keeps pretty good time, and it'll tell you the time in another time zone. So the Apple Watch is $400 to $600. This Rolex GMT Master is about 20 grand. It is a functionally inferior object. If you're in a car crash, you're toast. Right? So what's the delta here? Let's look at some other examples. This is a Honda Fit. It's a wonderful car. It retails for about $16,190. You can get groceries. You can get your kids to and from soccer practice, take them to school, go on a road trip. It's not going to cost you a bunch, especially in times like this where fuel prices are so high. If you wanted to go to Home Depot and load in like some 2x4s, it's a hot hatchback. You can flip those back seats down, slide some stuff in. You can get her done with this vehicle. This is a Lexus RCF. It retails for $64,900, two-door. If you're going out on the town, couple, and you've got another pair of friends going with you, ladies in dresses, if they have to sit in the back, it's not going to be convenient because you've got to climb through into that back seat. Road trip, you could do it, but it's going to cost you more. Taking the kids to and from soccer, yes, but again, if you had to put someone in a car seat in the back seat, that's not going to be great. Definitely don't want to put some 2x4s in this thing. It's probably not a good idea. So here's my question to you. These are two examples, and we could do this all day. We could do it all week. just comparing and contrasting the various products in our lives that are popular products that we have some experience with. Why in the world would anyone pay $48,710 more for a functionally equivalent product? I would say a functionally inferior product. So it's not rhetorical. Why would anyone do that? Status, okay. We're signaling to other people. Why is status important to us? Ego, okay. Say that again? Beauty, okay. It looks great, and how does that affect us? Yeah. We probably all have objects that we love. I just bought a Martin guitar recently, and I love that object. It's so beautiful. Every time I get to play it, it feels like such a treat. Any other reason why we'd this is basically, you could buy 4 Honda Fits for that one Lexus.
Yeah, my husband will buy the watch, will buy the car, and it's all about, I like the way the doors sound when I close it. I like the way the wheel feels when I touch it.
Yeah. It's an affliction. If you're a designer, like it's a hard way to live. Yeah. Yeah. The driving experience, okay. I mean, it's going to sound good. It's going to go fast. You're going to look cool at the stoplight. Harder to obtain, right. So again, we go back to status. So if we were to strip this stuff down further and further, it goes down to like, it's changing the human experience. It is changing the human experience. It makes me feel more attractive to drive a Lexus RCF than a Honda Fit. And if I feel more attractive, I am inherently more attractive to potential mates, to other people. I look cooler. Some people are going to say, like, you look like a jerk in that car, right? There's an argument to be made there. But we cannot argue with the data. The data says people spend 4, 5, 10, 20, 100 times more on objects that make them feel a certain way. So if we're designing great products, we should probably be conscious not just about what it does for us, not just thinking like Mr. Spock, but also like Captain Kirk. So what are you selling? What are you selling in your product? You're selling, you can do this thing, you're empowered to do that, and that could be changing the human experience, making someone feel something. But ultimately, this might be another thing that you're familiar with, this idea of jobs to be done. When you go buy a hammer, you're not buying a hammer. You're buying the experience of seeing all of your family photos in the hallway. You're putting nails in the wall so you can feel connected to your human story. That's powerful emotionally. So if we were to think about like a hierarchy of needs, there's the Maslow's hierarchy of needs from the 1950s, and modern day psychologists sort of poke holes in some of those theories. But if we were to think about some of that hierarchy and how it translates to the idea of product design, we're building functional tools. That's foundational. We can't build something that's emotionally engaging and it's at the expense of functionality. We want to build things that are reliable, that people can count on. You get in that car, it's going to start up, and you're going to be able to take the kids to soccer practice. Something that's usable, that doesn't make people feel like an idiot because I can't learn how to use this thing. I don't know how to do what I need to do. And then ultimately, we want to create something that's emotionally engaging. And there's something that we leave on the table here, is in that top part, the value creation opportunity when we can create emotionally engaging products. When the door closes on that door of that Mercedes and it sounds like a vault, that's engaging. People buy that. People buy that every day. They're buying it right now. We're in Atlanta. Lots of people are buying that experience, right? We can create deeper value. Now, I'm giving you industrial design and architecture examples. Can we actually translate that into the digital space as well? We'll look at some examples here in a minute, but the point that I want to draw your attention to is historically, like in the past few years, this phrase "design for delight" has been on a lot of people's lips. We want to create a delightful experience. We all know what it felt like the past 2.5 years to have fear at the top of our mind. Every night when you wake up, in the middle of the night. Every morning you wake up and you wonder, when's that vaccine going to be created? Is the vaccine going to be safe? What happens when my kids go to school? Am I still going to have a job? I don't have a job. I've got to figure out how to pay the bills. The human experience, we can change the human experience, but the human experience is filled with lots of emotions. Trust, mistrust, sense of belonging, fear, anxiety, all of these things we can design for. We can be cognizant of those emotions that people bring to our product experience, and we can shape that. We can sand off the edges where there is a lot of anxiety and fear. We can make it better, and when we do, we create value for our customers and for the business as well. How do we do that? I find that with big problems, it's often easiest to start in a small increment. So we can design moments into a product. If we think about the customer journey, and there's sort of like a horizontal line of satisfaction, where it's like, okay, I bought this thing, it's serving me pretty well, it's doing what I wanted to do, and then sometimes that experience, it dips, and it's not so good. That's a valley moment, where it's like, holy cow, I'm trying to set this up, super confusing, I have no idea what's happening. You overcome that, and there might be a peak moment of like, I did the thing. I did that thing that I paid money for. And you feel amazing. Or something else happens that makes you feel good. So the customer journey is filled with peaks and valleys. And we need to be aware of those because those are our moments that we can potentially design for. So let me give you an example of a valley moment in a digital product that had profound effect on customers. TurboTax, anyone file their taxes with TurboTax? It's an Intuit company. So TurboTax is, it's great, and part of what they're selling here is just, they're selling you competence. I feel like an idiot, and I'm super afraid of the IRS. I just want to get this data in the system, and I want to pay my taxes and get it over with as fast as possible. And they even design it so you can do this on the phone, because that's fast and easy. But there is a question that the IRS has to ask you if you've been filing jointly, you're married filing jointly, is has your spouse passed away since the last filing? And for a number of Americans, when they're filing, the answer is yes. They tick the box and say, yes, I lost my spouse. Now think about that for a minute. So if you're going to work and you're a product designer, you're an engineer, product manager, this is just another screen in a flow. But for the person who's ticking that box, it's not just another screen. This thing is loaded with emotion. What are you feeling when you tick that box? You feel, of course, great grief, deep grief probably. You lost your partner, your best friend. Perhaps that changed your financial situation. You have a lot of fear. Perhaps that person was the one who handled the taxes, knows where all the receipts are and the numbers. They were the ones who stored that information, and you were, master of other domestic domains. So ticking that box triggers a lot of emotion. There's a small thing here. It might be a little hard to see on the screen, but when you tick that box, there's a little piece of text that pops in that says, we're sorry to hear about your loss. You can count on us to get your tax return done right. It's very simple. And was this a significant thing where you need to go petition the product manager, go petition the VP of product to be able to put this in the product? No, it's, write some thoughtful text, talk to your engineering partner, and here it is. You tick a box, this text shows. But it has profound effects on people, and people have written in many times to Intuit. Here's an example. I finally got around to doing taxes yesterday. After our information was transferred from last year's return, it asked if either of us has passed away. I entered the information that my husband died on June 15th, and a screen came up that said, we're sorry for your loss. I sat there and stared at it, crying for a few minutes. It was so cathartic. Please pass on to the team how much that one little sentence meant to me. Whoever thought that up must be a very caring person. So the TurboTax team has a great phrase for this. They call it an ownable moment. Intuit has actually had that axiom, design for delight, since its founding in the 1980s. And that's guided them along the way for a long time. I think it served them well for quite a while. But at a certain point, one of the design teams, the one working on TurboTax, said, this is limiting. This is, doesn't fully encompass what we want to do and create inside of our products. We're trying to create an ownable moment where we know the way that a person feels, we know what people are bringing to that, and we can own that and do something really special and pay attention. Garen Engstrom, he used to be on that team. He wrote about this. He said, emotional design is not just about delight and positive emotion. In reality, it's about all emotion, good and especially bad. If the user's feeling uncertain or fearful, don't shy away from that or sweep it under the rug. Instead, lean into that emotion. Let the user know that you understand where they are emotionally and offer a way to put them at ease. Now, that's a valley moment example, but there are peak moments. And this is actually how I kind of discovered this space, this intersection of design and psychology. And that was when I was at MailChimp leading the design team. And I'd used the product for a long time, and I knew what it felt like to design an email and send it out. It was super stressful. It took a long time to write everything just so, double check the links and the grammar, get all the images assembled. For some people, you're collaborating with colleagues and getting all the stuff as well. And when you hit the send button, it's particularly scary because when you send out a few thousand emails, you can't suck it in if you got it wrong. You can't take it back. There's no Command-Z on sending 1,000 emails. So when you get it done, it just feels like a sense of tremendous accomplishment, like someone should run in the room and high-five you and hand you a beer because you got it done. And so that moment, we designed that experience. At first, it started back in 2008 as a simple screen, it was text that said, high five, your email is going out now. And then we ended up designing like a full animated experience. Unfortunately, the slide can't show you right here, but the idea is that before you press send, there's a sweaty monkey hand that's about to press the button, recognizing that this is stressful to press launch, right? And then you get the high five animation, and we spent far too long designing that high five animations, like these SVGs and lots of illustration and debates. But it had a profound effect on a lot of people. And what happened, this was not a marketing gimmick, by the way. People started to tweet, post on Facebook and Instagram, various places, of them literally high-fiving their screen. Like, am I the only one that high-fives the screen when sending an email? It was a profound thing, and we got literally hundreds of thousands of social media posts of people posting videos and so forth. It was a huge thing that turned into a series of T-shirts, turned into a video game. There were foam hands. It was a thing. And I wondered, what was it that really resonated about this? So there's a couple things. One is recognizing how does a person feel at that moment? And if you can see that, if you're perceptive enough to see that, and you can design something for that, people will, they recognize it and they respond in a huge way. The other part of it was timing, where it lands. And this is something that we did not know. This is sort of like apocryphal learning about how this works. It turns out there's a science of moments. Have you heard of Daniel Kahneman? You probably have heard of him. Thinking Fast and Slow, famous economist, Nobel laureate. Also Holocaust survivor. I mean, he's just an amazing, profound human being. And his partner, Amos Tversky, they've had tremendous influence on economics, psychology. Many disciplines have been influenced by their work. They studied a really bizarre thing that that told us a lot about the science of moments, and it was colonoscopies of all things. Colonoscopies are done differently these days. They put you to sleep and didn't know what happened. It's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and you're out on the other side. But it used to be that they didn't put you under, and it was a really painful experience, as you might guess. And so there was a study done where they did 2 different groups going through the procedure. One was a longer procedure by about 3 minutes. One was a shorter procedure. The shorter procedure, the last minute of the procedure was really painful. And the last minute of the longer procedure was uncomfortable. And what they discovered was that the people who had gone through the shorter but painful ending experience characterized the experience much worse than people who went through the longer but uncomfortable ending experience. And what Kahneman and Tversky surmised from that was essentially that our brains work like this, that we have the experiencing self, lots of inputs coming in through sight, sound, taste, touch, etc. Many inputs coming in, and our brain has to filter some of those inputs out and only store certain bits, the bits that are most important. And if we think about ourselves not as human beings, but as, machines, a machine that wants to survive and continue on, it's in that machine's best interest to remember the things that cause pain that could lead to its demise. So we encode that in our long-term memory very quickly. That goes into the remembering self. So the experiencing self, this is awful, it's terrible. All the other details of the procedure, everything leading up, gets fuzzy really quick. But that painful experience is in great clarity. And the remembering self looks back on that and says, that 11-minute procedure, terrible, it was awful. I would not do that again. And that is because of the way that our brain encodes those memories. So keeping that in mind, it's not an accident that the bad part of the experience was at the very end of the procedure. What we had accidentally discovered at MailChimp was that when you put a peak experience at the end of a workflow, people remember that better. They remember that more clearly. And that caused them to spread the word and tell a lot of people. It influenced product growth and so forth. Again, that was not our intention. We were just trying to create a really engaging product. There's another dimension to designing for emotion, and that is, personality. And it's a powerful thing. It's this mysterious force that pulls us together, and it also pushes us apart in our real world. And there are products that use personality as a way to engage their customers. Does anybody use Headspace? Right? A few people. I use it pretty much all the time, especially for the getting back to sleep stuff, because I wake up in the middle of the night all the time. Headspace is interesting. They did something that seemed impossible. They took a distracting platform and made it a space for mindfulness. And they were the ones who sort of broke in and created that whole mindfulness space and made it popular. They use character animation. If anyone's used it or you've seen their marketing materials, their videos and so forth, there's a lot of character animation and storytelling, personality in the color and the shape, even the design of the buttons and so forth. It's all of that stuff comes together to create a personality for the product. And it had a big influence on their growth. Anna Charity, who's no longer at Headspace, but she used to be the head of design, especially early on. She said this: the mind is a complex place, and it's always not always an easy place to inhabit, which is why meditation is so valuable. We knew we had to develop a style that translated these ideas in an approachable and relatable way. Animation and illustration became integral to the brand. If you think about the emotions that people bring to a product like that, especially in the past couple of years, what are those emotions? Fear. I cannot sit still for 10 minutes. This is going to be a really painful experience. Just I'm not thinking of anything for 10 minutes. Anxiety, like I'm freaked out about the world, I'm freaked out about being a human being. Fear, anxiety, there's a lot of emotion, stress that people bring to this product. So how do you address that? Well, by creating a personality that sands off those rough edges of the human experience. Again, Anna Charity, by using characters and storytelling, we break down the barriers of a tough subject matter and present it in a lighthearted but sensitive way. Characters are a great vehicle to represent the weirdness in your head. It feels playful and memorable as a result. What I find interesting about Headspace's approach is that it could quickly go romper room and feel very juvenile, but it uses that personality in just the right places to take something that would otherwise be a very opaque, distant concept that comes from Buddhism and hundreds of years of research and practice, and makes it seem very accessible to the mere mortals like us. And it turns out that personality, when it's used effectively, it will shape purchasing decisions, whether or not people choose to buy something and how much they're willing to pay for that thing. Here's another example for you. Gooder is a company that makes cheap sunglasses. Some of you may use them. They're pretty fun. They are not particularly special objects, I would say. They're not superior to the sunglasses that you could probably get at CVS or Walgreens down the street. But they're good. There's this fun personality with each one of these products. Cool colorways, interesting kind of graphics that make them fun and kind of youthful. And then the content around them, the name of the product, like Merlin's Squirrel Fetish is the name of one of the sunglasses, the photography and so forth. It feels really fun to buy that. The purchasing experience feels fun and exciting. And it's curious and like, I want to go look at another product because that one was so hilarious that I'll go to the next one. So it changes that purchasing decision that I'm going to buy maybe a few of these, or I'm more likely to make a purchase because I've got a smile on my face. That's one example. This I find particularly interesting. Two researchers, academics, Josh Glenn and Rob Walker, did a project with their grad students called Significant Objects, in which they went to a bunch of different secondhand stores and bought a bunch of tchotchkes, like cheap stuff like this, like a ceramic cow. Doesn't do anything. It sits on your shelf and creates surface area for dusting. It just creates more work for you. They buy it for like 50 cents. They sell it for like $85 on eBay. How did they do that? They spent a total of $128 on stuff, not special stuff. And they made it special by writing about it, by writing stories, by creating a personality for that product, and then listing that on eBay and selling it. And they made $3,612.51, 28x return on investment. If you worked at Kleiner Perkins and you made that return, you would be like, they'd carry you around the office on their shoulders. That's incredible. How did they do that? They did it by engaging people's emotions, by changing the human experience, by creating an opportunity for people to have a relationship with that object that they want to have in their life that will change the way they feel. So I alluded to earlier that it's not all about just feeling good. It's not about designing for delight all the times. Headspace, they're designing for anxiety, fear, stress, etc. There are a lot of other examples, and I think especially in the past few years, we've seen a number of social issues that have arisen that have put a finer point on this, and if we're not already thinking about it, we're going to have to think about it real soon. Banking is one of those places where, fintech, where designing for emotion is so essential because banks have a long history of taking advantage of people, of mistreating people. Has anyone used Wealth Simple? Just curious, a couple people. This is a really interesting new product and a very hard product space. It's basically AI investing. So you put your money in a kitty, and there's some artificial intelligence that's going to go like put the chips on various squares for the roulette wheel. And it's going to optimize alpha, optimize your return. Now, first of all, people have a hard time investing on a regular basis because they can't think of their future self very effectively. Second of all, they mistrust financial institutions. And third of all, sometimes the markets fall off a cliff and it's super scary. And I'm going to put this in the hands of a robot. That's a really high bar to achieve. I talked to Rudy Adler, who's head of design there. He said, we know what we do is different. It's hard to explain automated investing to someone who's never heard of that phrase, let alone someone who's never invested a penny. We wanted to make a site that provided information as simply, clearly, and beautifully as possible. And we wanted a central metaphor that was fun, elegant, and the opposite of tech confusing. If you visit their website, wealthsimple.com, it's essentially a really well-crafted, realistic-looking Rube Goldberg machine, where these gold coins kind of fall into slots and move into different places in a very sophisticated way. All of that is like a way of communicating the way that automation works. It'll automatically go over here. It's simple. It's easy. The money goes into the right places, and it grows for you. They ended up winning a Webby for their website. I naively, when I talked to Rudy about their site, I was like, how did you build all these Rube Goldberg machines? And he's like, dude, it's 3D animation. It's, we can do that now. It's just so lifelike and realistic that it's very convincing. So what does it say if you are a new investor, when you visit this website and you see something so sophisticated, just the home page? What does that say about what's behind the scenes in the AI? It gives the impression, it's signaling is what this is called. If it's this sophisticated up front on the surface, what's behind the scenes must be equally as sophisticated and evolved. So they are essentially creating trust by something called the primacy effect. That is our first impression with a person, a thing, a service, a website. That first impression shapes our understanding and our buying decision. In this case, whether or not we're going to sign up for this product. And when you get into the product, the emotional design continues. Most investing products, like a dashboard, it'll show you, here's how your portfolio is doing. Now, if you log in times like this, like last week, for example, and they show you 90 days, that's a pretty scary experience. That creates a lot of fear because the markets have been progressively falling off cliffs, and it looks like your portfolio fell into the Grand Canyon. It's like deep despair and sadness. And during the pandemic, I actually saw a neighbor walking past me in total despair, and she said, "I've lost my life savings." And I was like, "Hey, Judy, it's going to be okay. It'll come back." But it's hard when you're getting such a narrow view. It looks like the Grand Canyon, but it's actually a pothole. And that is what they do. They design the data display at a very zoomed out, like a four-year period. So you don't take action because fear biases us towards action, and action is the worst thing in a recession or in an economic downturn in the markets. You don't want to sell at the low. Hold fast. That's what they're designing for, fear and trust. I find it interesting, the more that we hear from Apple, new products that come out, new services, what is the underlying red thread in everything? It's privacy. Why are they drawing such attention to privacy? It's because our privacy is progressively disappearing. And that creates a lot of fear and mistrust that my data is being used to create economic advantage for another organization. That's happening a lot. And so they're using it not as like, hey, this is a cool feature, but it's like right up front. They have a whole page about privacy and where it manifests in all their products, all their software, all their services. And it draws a distinct contrast with their competitors. Another thing that needs to be on our radar, inclusion and empathy and how that plays a role in our design decisions and can influence buying decisions and the way that people feel. I've been super impressed with Project Inkblot. It's a tiny agency, Boywen Gao and Jahan Manton, who are doing a lot of great consulting work with companies around designing for empathy and inclusion. And they built a great framework that has a few principles that you can reference as you're designing products. Just want to pull out a couple of those real quick. The principles come in the form of questions. Question one is, what's the worst case scenario of the thing that you're designing? And who would be the recipient of that worst case scenario? And this is something that I think, because we're technologists, we are inherently idealistic, and we come to our work with like great intentions. I want to change the world. I remember about 8-10 years ago feeling like we can do no wrong. Technology is going to make the human experience better. It won't mess things up. Turned out that is not quite true, right? Technology has influenced our lives in a lot of negative ways as well. So there's a gap. We bring these great intentions to our work, but the impact is often not foreseen. We need to try to bridge that gap. Let me give you an example here. Airbnb is a fantastic company. I have chatted with Brian Chesky and the founders and know a lot of people over there. I'm super impressed with how thoughtful their leadership is, how great their design team is, how they think about the user experience in the physical world and the digital world. In many respects, you'd be hard-pressed to find a company that doesn't have more advantage and agency to make good decisions for their products. And yet, even a company like Airbnb makes mistakes. Maybe you're familiar with the hashtag Airbnb while black. There's a whole TED Talk about how Airbnb designs for trust by create a human connection of showing the face of the person, the guest who wants to book your place, show their face and name to the host, who then decides, yes, you can stay, or no, you can't. And they brought a ton of thoughtfulness and good intention. These are people who went to RISD, Rhode Island School of Design, thought deeply about design, and designed a very thoughtful human experience. Their entire success of the company is built upon trust between the host and the guest. And if they can't establish that, it's all broken. It doesn't work. The company crumbles. And it turns out that system that they originally designed with good intent created bias, created opportunity for hosts to disproportionately deny African Americans booking opportunities, 16% less likely to be accepted compared to guests with distinctly white names. Now, in Airbnb's defense, they have done a ton of stuff to try to address this. I talked to Brian Chesky about this. They invested in a lot of great things to try to make this better. I don't think it's perfect, but if you Google Project Lighthouse, Airbnb Project Lighthouse, you'll see some of the stuff that they're doing. Nonetheless, the point is we need to follow up on the outcomes of our best intentions. What could have Airbnb done differently? They could have, been more connected to their community of hosts and guests after the fact. We made a thing. We did research before that. We made the thing for the people. We put it into the world and trusted it was as we expected. It was not. So continuous user research, continuous connection and understanding of what's actually happening is really essential. Who might you be excluding? And this is something that your teams can help put biases out in front of you to recognize who might be excluded in your product experience with something called an all people statement. So if you're Peloton, you could ask a question like, all people feel they can achieve their exercise goals on our platform. I don't think I can achieve all my exercise goals on Peloton because it's a bunch of young, super fit people, and who am I? I'm a gray-haired old guy. So that might not be true. They might feel like, hey, we're creating a great product for everyone to change their lives, but put these all-people statements out there for your team to poke holes in and find the gaps. And ultimately, this comes to like this foundational thing that's at the core of the human experience, which is feeling a sense of, I belong in this space. I'm going to buy this product, and I feel like this product invites me in. This is personally very important to me. I'm the father of 2 African-American boys. This is Bellamy in the gray sweatshirt. He's going to turn 9 next week. And Olivier, this picture is a little older. He's in 7th grade and well on his way to being a grumpy teenager. But, growing up as a white man in the United States, I grew up in the Midwest. I had a very different experience, childhood experience than, in some respects, than my boys who are black growing up in the South. And there are certain things that I wouldn't feel comfortable letting them do. And what they see in the world is different than what I see. So, for example, when Bellamy was in kindergarten, he's sixth grade, or 6 years old rather. It was Sunday morning. We were playing Candyland. You ever played that game? You don't have to read. It's a timeless, fun game. We were playing Candyland on the floor in the living room. And I was looking at the board, and I said to Bellamy, hey, Bellamy, who do you think designed this game? And, he doesn't know much about design, probably little if nothing. And he said, oh, a white person designed it. I said, how do you know that? Well, all the characters on the board are white people. He's 6. He's 6 years old, and he sees that. So every time you're designing a marketing page, every time you're designing, taking photographs, you're showing your customers, you're showing an experience. Who are you showing? Who's there? Who's invited and who's welcome? There's a huge opportunity here, and I think there's there's just a big bias that's built into the way that we think about this. I talked to Diogenes Burrito. He works at Slack. He did this has been a couple years ago, but they were designing a simple marketing campaign when the Add to Slack button came out. You could put on your website and pass some content into Slack and share it with your colleagues. And he decided to design this hand that's kind of like descending from the heavens with the Slack button. And it was a brown hand. This is not a major design decision. It is shift the hue of this hand. And people flipped. They went crazy over this and acknowledged hey, it's really rare to see my skin color reflected in anything like popular culture, so forth. And I see it, and you see it, and thank you. I am seen. That's a profound experience, to be seen and recognized and welcomed. Dio, he wrote about this on Fast Company. He said, why was the choice an important one? Why did it matter to the people of color who saw it? Simple answer is they rarely see something like that. People saw the image and immediately noticed how unusual it was. They were appreciative of being represented in a world where American media has the bad habit of portraying white people as a default and everyone else as deviations from the norm. I mean, we just got Band-Aids that are brown just recently. We're business people. We understand what total addressable market is. There are a lot more people of color than white people on the planet. And if I'm running, Procter & Gamble or whoever's making Band-Aids, I want to sell as many products to as many people as possible. So belonging and welcoming is so important. Back to our friends at Airbnb, they use a concept called priming. Do you remember the story of Pavlov and the dog? He feeds his dog, dog's mouth waters, and he's ringing the bell. Does it again and again to the point where he just rings the bell and the dog's mouth waters. We can use that in product design as well. Airbnb has a design system with a library of illustrations, and those illustrations show a lot of different types of people, representative of the people you would encounter in the real world. people that might have different abilities, people who might be old, people who might be have a different gender identity, or couples that don't have the same skin tone. When you see that in the booking experience, in the hosting setup experience, it primes you to say, here's what to expect. When you go through this process, the Airbnb experience looks like this, looks like all the people. So expect all the people. Now, the business side of emotional design, because oftentimes people see this as like, it's squishy. We're talking about people's emotions. That feels like a nice to have. Hopefully, I've given you a bit of a glimpse at how this does create some value for a company. But I just want to look at that straight ahead and give you some direct examples. Sam Altman, he was the Y Combinator chairman who's now stepped down, but he's influenced a lot of different companies, technology companies. He said this: it's better to build something that a small number of users love than a large number of users like. Anyone have theories why Sam Altman, who's an engineer and a business person, might hold this view? Yeah. Say that again. Okay, word of mouth advocacy, that's huge. That's much more effective than you dumping a massive marketing budget into Google AdWords. Okay, other theories? Yeah.
Harder to copy. It's easy to.
Great. Building a moat. Yeah. Yeah. I think I see a hand over here. Yeah.
You're not going to part with something that you love, so retention.
Yep, exactly. So these are all great. It's customer acquisition, it's marketing, it's retention. When something goes sideways, a server goes down, people are more likely to stick with you. Like Peloton has a recall, Tesla has a recall. People stick with that product because they're emotionally invested in it. They want to tell other people about it. So let's just look at some very concrete examples of how designing for emotion, shaping human experience, creating value for your customer, and creates value for the company. Category creation: if you're creating a new product, trying to break into a brand new space that people don't know, they're not thinking, hey, my phone, which totally distracts me every moment of the day, could actually be the thing that makes me more mindful and focused. Category creation, emotional design did that for Headspace. And I would argue for Calm and even Waking Up, Sam Harris's app, which is tremendous. I love that one. Simple, we saw that example. Customer acquisition. They are addressing the trust, the negative emotion that people bring to it. A new abstract concept of AI-driven investing. Is this something I can trust? So it's helping them get over those negative emotions and make that account on their platform. And it retains customers when the markets fall off the cliff by preventing them or reducing the likelihood that they're going to sell everything and close their account. Retention. Anybody use Duolingo? It's a great product. Yeah, and you raised your hand not just like to say I use it, but you raised your hand with a giant smile because you love it, because it's fun to use. And I tell you, Duolingo is one of those like using all of the Las Vegas psychological manipulations for good, its powers for good, of unlocking things at certain times so you feel accomplishment. Like a little character that pops out and says, hey, you did it, that brings you back, notifications. This thing is full of trying to tap into the human psychology machine to increase your session length and increase your return rate so you will learn a language faster and retain what you've learned. I learned this at MailChimp. We learned it at first on accident and then on purpose that growth and market reach was greatly influenced by emotional design. Not just the high five moment, but the way that we approached illustration, our marketing methodology, it just was baked into what we were doing. How do we integrate this into our design process? What I often hear is, sorry if you're a developer, I'm not trying to pick on you here, but engineers who are like, hey, I'm optimizing for how fast can we make this, how stable can we make it, when can we ship. Same with product folks too. Not picking on you, sorry. But optimizing for speed, it's important because we have competitive pressures and we have things we want to achieve. We have goals and so forth. People want to get their bonus and they want to buy their kid a new bike. But ultimately, it's a bit short-sighted. It's a very flawed approach, especially when we're thinking about what an MVP is, a minimum viable product. And usually what we think of is a minimum viable product is let's sprint in this agile methodology and get basic functionality out there. We'll get feedback from customers, and then we'll iterate and improve. Problem is, if that is not a good product, you don't get good feedback. You get crap feedback. You put crap in, you get crap out. Think about the last product you downloaded, the last app you downloaded on your phone. You were excited, you were curious, you thought, hey, this might be cool. You try it out, it sucks, you deleted it. 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road, year, you think, oh, I'm sure they've been iterating. I bet they've got a really good product and engineering team. They probably iterated and it's good. I bet it's better now. I'll download it again. You don't do it. It's just statistically, people don't do it. This goes back to the primacy effect. If it wasn't good out of the gate, you're not coming back. What's the cost to the business? You lost those early customers. They're not coming back. Now, you could go acquire different customers, but ultimately, it's very short-sighted when we think about MVPs as a basic level of functionality. It should be a minimum lovable product. What's the product that people are going to love and engage? It's not this thing on the left. It's not a slice of that functional layer. It is a slice from top to bottom of all strata. It is functional. It is reliable, it is usable, and it is emotionally engaging. It is all of those things out of the gate. That's what a good MVP looks like. That creates value for a business. How do we do this? We investigate the emotional needs of our customers. You can use things like empathy maps are effective when you're doing customer interviews. Talking to customers, going and visiting them, watching them do things, watching them struggle. Is very effective because when you feel their pain, you recognize that and you can design something that solves that problem. But investigating customers' emotional needs, when I used to run the research team at MailChimp, at one point we traveled 100,000 miles on 3 continents in 1 year to watch customers, talk to customers, and learn. When they lean forward, when they get big body language, they drop F-bombs, 4-letter words, you can see the emotion pop up where they're excited, they're stressed, etc. And that is going to tell you this is a peak moment, this is a valley moment, this is a thing that we could potentially design for. There are a bunch of great resources, Emotion-Centered Design Toolkit from Mattermind Studio. It's medium.com, emotion-centered-design, or if you just Google Emotion-Centered Design Toolkit. These are some methodologies to get your customers talking about their emotions. It's not always easy. Mapping the customer journey is a tremendously valuable tool. I'm sure you already know that. You probably already have created some maps. But the way that we think about the maps, I think, can be challenged or reconsidered a little bit. This is one that the design team at Airbnb shared with me. And this is trust through time. Customer trust through time. And they're showing the potential for a peak or the potential for a valley. And their big peak and valley moment is that what they call the moment of truth. When you check in, was it what you expected or not? And if it wasn't, that's terrible. And if it was, hey, fantastic. Finding your moments, those peaks and those valleys, identifying those. And it's a simple thing. You can focus your attention just on a single bit of the product experience that sands off the edges if it's, creates trust, reduces fear and anxiety, or maybe it creates joy and delight. And then consider how to measure the impact of that moment. So I gave you all those examples of like customer acquisition, retention rate, et cetera. Your metrics are all going to be different. So think carefully about those. There's no one-size-fits-all with the metrics, but there are ways to measure this stuff. I am just scratching the surface. This goes a lot deeper. If this is interesting to you, I actually wrote a book during the pandemic, the second edition of Designing for Emotion, that has a lot of these examples and many others that could help you out. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. Thank you.